Greetings and welcome to my show. My name is Duncan. This is the Grumpy News, and I was going to bring you a video on anti-Semitism in Australia, which is a topic of particular relevance at the moment. However, there have been events over the past few days which have led to me becoming particularly grumpy, more grumpy than usual, and that's saying something. And these events relate to President Zelensky's visit to the White House, and that occurred on the 28th of February of this year, and President Zelensky was there to discuss further and possibly sign this minerals deal, which Trump was planning to formalize. And my initial thoughts on this deal were that it was a very good thing, because as I mentioned in my previous video, where a nation's interests are tied to those of another, that nation, i.e. America, will be more likely to intervene and to protect the interests of the other nations, especially if these resources are as rare as Trump is saying. We need supply chains of rare earth elements that are free from political coercion, not able to be broken, and so on. So this would have been a very good deal for the United States and for Ukraine. And what President Zelensky was looking for was assurances that this would be linked to some form of defense, assurances or guarantees. Trump, it would seem, was reluctant to provide those guarantees. And let me say, first of all, I do get it. I do understand Trump's position. If you go back to the Iraq War, which in my view was a complete disaster, and as we know, completely unnecessary, the estimates were that over $3 trillion was the cost to the US economy of this debacle. And what did America and the allies who took part in that conflict receive for their efforts and for the obscene number of deaths that occurred? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So America is apparently $30 trillion in debt. So I do get it. There comes a point where America is looking for other nations to provide a some reciprocity, a reciprocal arrangement, whereas they provide something, they will get something in return. So as we all know, Trump is transactional by nature. This is his businessman mindset. Now, what happened in the Oval Office, in the White House, was nothing short of an absolute disgrace. I am old enough to have remembered as a child when the news flash came on the TV that JFK had been assassinated. Since that time, I have followed American politics closely, and I have been alive through all of the presidents subsequent to JFK. Never in all those years has something so disgraceful occurred in the White House, and the attempted humiliation of President Zelensky was absolutely disgraceful. Now, they should have got all of those issues, conflicts aired before they went out in front of the cameras and discussed in a way that was appropriate, dignified, and polite where they were up to and any issues that may need to be resolved. I was absolutely disgusted at the behavior of Donald Trump and of J.D. Vance. I think such behavior is absolutely disgraceful. As I've said before, we have to know who our friends and our enemies are. Vladimir Putin is not a friend and never will be. In his DNA, it's ingrained into him, the West is a threat. The West is there to be subverted, and the Soviet system will prevail and will triumph. That is in his DNA. We saw this with Europe. All of the energy resources that Russia had, Europe was prepared to buy and to enter into a formal trade agreement with Russia that benefited Russia and benefited Europe. Trade, engage in diplomacy, engage in linkage. NATO and Europe was never a threat to Russia. Putin decided to throw that away. He could not reinvent Russia. The Soviet Empire has collapsed. It will never be reconstituted. Empires are never reconstituted. He had an opportunity to reinvent Russia, to make it strong and powerful again. However, his attempts to reconstitute the Soviet Empire, which is gone and dead, have ironically led to the further economic and military deterioration of Russia, and he has squandered the prestige of that nation. Also, this is what's happening in America. Now, I support Donald Trump in many of the things he's done. When I see illegal criminals being deported from the United States, I think to myself, why hasn't this happened before? What's the issue there? Criminals who happen to be illegal aliens, they're continuing to engage in crime and yet are still in the United States. Of course they should be deported. And if the countries of origin of those individuals who happen to be citizens of other countries, if their nations do not accept them back, well, use tariffs as Trump has done, or the threat of tariffs. So I fully agree with a lot of the things that Trump is doing. He's trying to get something back for America. For a long time, America has done all of the running, pulled the weight. This has been the case in Europe. Europe has let its defenses run down. As I said previously, the first thing that Germany did after the invasion of Ukraine was to pump 100 billion euros into the German defense system. That's how badly it was run down. Trump stated this years ago, pull your weight. I fully agree with him in regards to that. But he's made a mess of this current issue and where we're at with Ukraine. Everyone wants to see a resolution to that conflict. It is a dreadful war. All of these lives being lost, civilian lives in Ukraine, the lives of Russian soldiers being lost at a not astronomical rate. and all of that money squandered. And as I've said, Putin has squandered the prestige of Russia. Nations, after having seen the performance of the weaponry and so on that Russia has, are going to turn to the United States and other nations for weaponry. So Russia's defense industry, I'm sure, will be on its knees subsequently. And the backdrop to this is that I'm quite certain that Putin and Xi Jinping of China, they've already carved up the nations that they want to incorporate into their empire. So Putin is attempting the impossible, that is to reconstitute the Soviet Empire, and he's indicated what he wants, and that's basically all of Europe. And Xi Jinping, he's going to start with Taiwan, and it will be on from there on. Well, thank goodness that Australia has signed up for the AUKUS agreement, because we need an effective deterrence, because China is empire building and Russia is attempting to reconstitute its empire. As I've stated previously, all of history has to be understood through the lens of empire. And so also when we talk about rules-based order, really what are we talking about there? We're talking about the authority that the nations, the richest nations and the most powerful, have over the rules, or what's written as the rules. So what I mean by that is that the United Kingdom, for instance, we would see that as an authoritative nation that is part of the rules-based order. And we would see the United States as part of the rules-based order. And those are the nations that are wanting to keep the rules-based order. However, those nations themselves have engaged in war and conflict and invaded other countries, which is criticized under the rules-based order. So from my own background and from the United Kingdom, well, England started, it invaded Wales, Scotland, Ireland. It went on from there to build an empire through invasion and through colonization. And then that empire shrunk, as it inevitably had to, after World War II. So the rules-based order is written by nations who themselves engaged in conflict. So it's an essential component of history. History is dynamic. There never has been a rules-based order, and there never will be, because it's in our DNA to build empires. It's like being in a big pond. The bigger the fish you are, you eat the smaller fish. That's the way it is. It's the way it's been since the 12th, 13th, 14th centuries. It's the way it is in the 21st century, and it's the way it always will be, unless something happens that our brains and our DNA changes. So to get back to Trump and to the issue that played out in the White House, there's something that you need in order to maintain your influence in the world, and that is, one, prestige, and two, an internal coherence as to the principles that you supposedly represent. So the manifest destiny of the United States, as it first grew from the colonies, became independent from the British, forged its trail in death and blood across the continent, fighting wars with Mexico and Spain and the indigenous population. And also it was only Alaska and was it Louisiana that was purchased, while the rest was by conquest. But America's manifest destiny is seen as that of spreading democracy, liberty, and freedom across the world, and to free nations from tyranny and from dictatorship. That has been America's manifest destiny. And as someone coming originally from the United Kingdom and living from Australia, I have to say, we need America. We need America as the strongest economic power and the strongest military nation in history to defend the free world and to participate in and guarantee our freedoms and our liberties that we sometimes take for granted. So we have these emerging superpowers. China is going to continue to encroach and spread its empire. And as I've said, we have Putin, who's attempting to reconstitute an empire, which, as I've said, will never work. So I was extremely disappointed, angered, and disgusted by what happened and the way President Zelensky was treated. Ukraine is at war. Its survival is being threatened. Their civilians are being massacred and bombed. And apparently a point of issue at the White House meeting was whether President Zelensky wears a suit. I have never heard anything so ridiculous in all my life and so disgraceful. President Zelensky is fighting for the survival of his nation. He's not interested in what suit he may have to wear. Winston Churchill was one also known not to wear a suit. What the hell has sartorial elegance got to do with fighting a war? Nothing. Ukraine is at war. Its survival is at stake. Ukraine matters. It matters because it's a nation trying to be independent, democratic, and westward leaning. We need to support that in every way possible that we can. Putin only understands force and deterrence. He's a machine. He doesn't understand anything else. And if you think that Putin can be appeased, you are wrong. Until he takes his last dying breath, Putin is going to attempt to undermine everything that the Western powers do, and he has a burning hatred for Ukraine. Any arrangement, any agreement, any treaty that is in place, he will attempt to undermine. And so there has to be very clear guarantees provided to Ukraine in regards to their future. Yes, it does matter. It matters because there is a dictatorship attempting to overcome, defeat a nation that is emerging as a democracy and as a member of the European Union and its aspirations to be a member of NATO. This is a wholly unnecessary war. The Ukrainians have suffered, and we owe them greater respect than what President Zelensky received in the White House. And so I'll conclude that for today. But these things really anger me. It is really very simple. We need ongoing, effective leadership from the United States as the primary economic and military power in the free world, in association with its allies, which includes the other members of Europe and of NATO. Now, there is a chance that perhaps effective diplomacy will get back on track. I certainly hope so. But I do hope that the current administration in America will come to its senses. And it's been clear for a long time how to handle Putin. He only understands effective deterrence. And we must provide Ukraine with whatever military support we can in order for them to maintain their independence and their sovereignty. So that's all that I've got to say today. As I've said, that makes me particularly grumpy, what's happened in the White House. And as you know, as I've mentioned before, if you're not grumpy, you don't really understand what's happening in the world. That's all I've got to say today. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again soon. Please watch my channel and subscribe. Bye-bye.